Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're venturing into a really expansive idea.
Really big stuff, yeah.
It's this concept that, well, everything, all of existence,
Yeah.
springs from and is connected by just one single, limitless, intelligent, and creative energy field.
Mm,
Our source for this dive, it explores this metaphysical viewpoint, suggesting this field operates, beyond our usual ideas of time and space.
right, totally outside those
And
constructs.
it manifests in all these countless forms, but at its heart, it remains just one thing, one unified source.
So we're here to kind of unpack that, see where it takes us.
So exactly, let's dive in.
Okay, so right away, the source hits us with this pretty interesting paradox.
Oh,
It
yeah.
says, before the creation of this universe, there was nothing. This nothingness was something.
Okay, wait, that sounds contradictory. Nothingness was something. How does that work?
Well, it challenges how we usually think of nothing, doesn't it? Like we
What?
imagine just absence, void.
Yeah, total emptiness.
But this source, it suggests something different. That this pre-universe nothingness, it wasn't actually empty at all. It was sort of brimming with potential, unrealized potential.
Like a reservoir of possibility, but unmanifested.
Exactly, a full reservoir, just not expressed yet.
Huh.
And, if you look around, this idea actually echoes in different spiritual traditions.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, think about the Buddhist concept of the void. It's not just blankness. It's seen as the ground of being, the source everything arises from.
Right, the potentiality itself.
Or in Kabbalah, there's the Ein Sof. That's like the infinite, unknowable divine essence before any creation, any form, limitless.
For definition.
Precisely. And then you have Advaita Vedanta's concept of Brahman, the ultimate reality, formless but containing the essence of all forms.
Wow. It's pretty striking how these, very different paths seem to point towards something similar, even with different words.
It really is. And here's where it gets maybe even more intriguing for some people. The source links this to science, too, specifically quantum physics.
Okay, how does quantum physics fit into nothingness being something?
Well, think about the quantum vacuum. Modern physics tells us that what seems like empty space isn't really empty.
Right, there are those fluctuations, virtual particles popping in and out.
Exactly. It's buzzing with activity, with potential energy that can manifest. Now, it's not saying it's the same as some conscious, intelligent field.
Oh, sure, it's an analogy.
Right. But it's a scientific perspective showing that foundational nothingness might be incredibly dynamic, a field of potential.
That's a really helpful parallel.
Yeah.
So this pre-universe state wasn't a void, it was pregnant with possibility.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The source uses the analogy of a blank canvas.
Oh, okay.
A blank canvas holds the potential for, well, infinite paintings, right?
Yeah.
Any image, any story.
That really helps visualize it, making the
Yeah.
abstract a bit more graspable.
Mm-hmm. And it's crucial, I think, to remember why this is so hard to get our heads around.
Because it's outside our normal experience.
Totally. This pre-cosmic state, it existed before time, before space, before cause and effect as we know them. Our minds are built on those frameworks.
So we're trying to understand something that, by definition, transcends our tools for understanding.
Pretty much. Like trying to imagine a color you've never seen that isn't even in the spectrum.
Okay. So boiling it down for everyone listening,
Right.
the core idea is, before anything was, there wasn't just nothing. There was
Yeah.
a kind of nothing that was actually like packed with the potential for everything.
Yes. That empty page just waiting for the whole story of the universe.
So that's quite a thought,
It really is.
Yeah.
And it naturally leads to a question, doesn't it?
which is,
Well, if we really entertain this idea, this notion that the origin of everything was the state of infinite potential, how might that change how we see things?
you mean how we see the universe now? Or ourselves?
Both, perhaps. Our own place in it all? Does it shift our perception of potential, maybe?
That's the real takeaway, I suppose. It pushes you to think about reality, about connection, in a potentially deeper way.
Indeed. That underlying unity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe that's the thought to leave everyone with.
Yeah.
Could thinking about nothingness not as absence, but as this vibrant, infinite potential, could that actually change how you see the potential within yourself and, I guess, the possibilities in the universe around you?
Something to chew on, definitely.
Absolutely. Definitely worth exploring on your own. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
You know how it is you want to grasp the big ideas, but maybe without getting totally bogged down?
Yeah, quickly get the essence.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Well, you've come to the right place. Today on the deep dive, we're tackling a Pretty fascinating concept. It's called infinite energy, the source of all, and it comes from the work of Manish Suryawanshi.
Right.
Our mission, really, is to unpack the core of this idea for you, specifically its key attributes.
And Suryawanshi lays those out quite clearly.
He does. He talks about this fundamental energy having, well, infinite intelligence
Infinite power.
and infinite creativity. So let's dive in.
Okay, so Suryawanshi's central idea, and it's a big one, is that underneath everything, there's this energy raised to the power of infinity.
Raised to the power of infinity. Wow.
Yeah, and he's suggesting it's not just, a massive amount of energy, is that the energy itself is inherently limitlessly intelligent,
Okay.
powerful, and creative. And what's really interesting, maybe for you listening, is how this kind of idea pops up elsewhere.
It does resonate, doesn't it? Suryawanshi himself points this out, which you might find quite compelling. He mentions Hinduism's concept of Brahman.
The ultimate reality.
Yeah, the source of everything that exists. It's quite striking how that aligns, conceptually at least.
It really is. And he also brings in Western mysticism, thinking about concepts like the divine mind or logos.
That intelligent force shaping reality.
Exactly. So if you step back and look at the bigger picture, you see this kind of recurring theme, right? This idea of a foundational, intelligent principle in different traditions.
It seems to be a persistent idea across cultures.
It does.
Yeah.
But what makes Suryawanshi's take perhaps a bit distinct is his strong emphasis on the infinite creativity aspect. It's not just smart and powerful, it's endlessly inventive.
Right, that creative spark. And then he makes a connection maybe more tentatively towards modern physics.
The hypothetical unified field.
This idea that maybe all the forces, all the particles we see could, boil down to one single underlying field.
It's not a perfect one-to-one match, obviously, but it hints at that same kind of underlying unity that Suryawanshi seems to be exploring from a different angle.
So when we use this word infinity, what does that really imply in this context? For you listening, what should that conjure up?
It means scope, scale, capability. Completely without limits, any limits whatsoever.
Okay.
It's not just a lot of energy. It's energy that's fundamentally unbound, unrestricted. Think of it like, well, potential that literally cannot run out, ever.
Which suggests it isn't just sitting there, right? It's not passive.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Suryawanshi really emphasizes this. It's an active, dynamic intelligence.
Active. Okay.
It's not merely existing. He suggests it's actively, constantly orchestrating things.
Like what sort of things?
Well, everything. From, the huge scale of galaxies forming, down to the incredible complexity of life emerging.
That idea of an actively intelligent universe, that's quite something to consider.
It is. The implication is there's an inherent intelligence guiding how the universe unfolds. This energy isn't just chaotic, it's purposefully shaping and creating.
And because it's infinite.
Right, because it's infinite, it logically can't be used up. It can't be depleted, it can't be contained. It's the ultimate source, the wellspring of literally all possibilities that you can see or even imagine.
Okay, and here's a thought that might really grab you listening. The potential connection to consciousness.
Ah, yes.
The idea that this infinite energy, this intelligence, might actually be the root of our own awareness.
That your consciousness in some way is a flicker or a manifestation of this much larger infinite intelligence.
That definitely raises some profound questions for you about, well, what you fundamentally are.
Exactly. If we entertain this idea of infinite energy as the base layer of reality, maybe your own awareness isn't just some random isolated fluke.
But an expression of something deeper.
Perhaps an expression of this universal intelligence itself playing out. It's a fascinating thought.
So just to kind of crystallize it for you, the listener, what we're talking about here is a limitless.
Unbelievably powerful.
Super smart.
And incredibly creative energy.
Yeah. It's positioned as the source of absolutely everything, like an endless ocean of pure potential. Everything bubbles up from that.
That's a good way to put it. An ocean of possibility.
So what's the main takeaway for you then?
I think the core insight, the thing to really mull over, is this concept of a fundamental energy. One that isn't just there, but is inherently intelligent, powerful, and creative.
And potentially the origin of, well, everything you experience.
Precisely. The source of all existence.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Considering this idea, this concept of an infinite and intelligent energy being the source, what new possibilities might you start to consider? In your own life, sure, but also in how you view the universe around you.
Good question to ponder.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Welcome to the deep dive. Sometimes you just want to get the gist of a big idea quickly, right?
Absolutely. Cut through the noise.
Exactly. So today we're looking at something pretty fascinating. Infinite energy, the source of all. It's based on the work of Manish Suryawanshi.
Hmm.
And our mission, basically, is to unpack this core idea for you, especially its main characteristics.
Which Suryawanshi identifies as three key things:
Hmm.
infinite intelligence, infinite power, and crucially, infinite creativity.
Right, let's get into it. So the central idea, it's pretty bold.
It really is. He posits that fundamentally everything is energy raised to the power of infinity. Energy to the power of infinity. Wow.
Yeah. And it's not just like a huge amount of energy. It's inherently intelligent, powerful, and creative. Infinitely so.
And what's interesting, and he points this out too, is how this idea kind of resonates with other concepts, doesn't it?
It does. He draws parallels, for instance, with Brahman in Hinduism,
Yeah.
the ultimate reality, the source.
Yeah, that sort of all-encompassing foundation. I see the connection. And also concepts from Western mysticism, things like the divine mind or logos.
Like an intelligent blueprint or force shaping things.
Precisely. An intelligent organizing principle. It's this recurring theme, across different philosophical and spiritual landscapes.
What seems unique in Suryawanshi's take, maybe, is that strong emphasis on creativity. Infinite creativity.
That definitely stands out. It suggests not just existence, but constant, boundless innovation originating from this source.
And he even touches on, well, hints at modern physics, right? The unified field idea.
The hypothetical unified field. That search for a single underlying source for all forces and particles.
It's not a perfect match, obviously, but it points towards that same kind of fundamental unity he's exploring.
Exactly. It's like different paths maybe circling the same mountain peak, perhaps.
So let's talk about infinity. When he says infinite energy, what does that really imply here?
Well, it means scope, scale, capability. All without any limit. Period.
No boundaries.
None whatsoever. It's not just a lot of energy. It's fundamentally unbound. Think of potential that literally never runs out.
Okay, so it's inexhaustible, and that suggests it's not passive, right? Not just some inert background thing.
Not at all. He stresses it's an active, dynamic intelligence. It's doing things.
Like what kind of things?
Well, orchestrating the cosmos, apparently. From, how galaxies form to the sheer complexity of life itself. Even human creativity, perhaps.
So the universe isn't just running on autopilot, according to this idea. There's an active intelligence involved.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
An intelligence inherent in the fabric of reality,
Yeah.
constantly shaping, constantly creating.
And because it's infinite, you can't really grasp it fully.
Right. It's inherently incomprehensible in its totality.
I know.
You can't deplete it. You can't contain it. It's the ultimate source of all possibilities.
Everything stems from it.
That's the core concept, like an endless ocean of potential.
And this next bit is really intriguing, the connection to consciousness.
Yes. The idea that this infinite energy might actually be the root of consciousness itself.
So our awareness, my awareness, your awareness, it's somehow part of this bigger infinite intelligence.
That's the really mind-bending suggestion. That human consciousness isn't just some random fluke, but maybe a localized expression of this fundamental universal intelligence.
Wow, that shifts perspective, doesn't it?
It certainly raises profound questions about who or what we fundamentally are.
Okay, so let's try and simplify the main takeaway for everyone listening.
If you boil it down, we're talking about a concept of energy that is limitless, super powerful, incredibly intelligent, and ceaselessly creative.
And it's the origin point for everything, the source of all existence. That endless ocean idea seems quite fitting.
Yes, an endless ocean of possibility is a good way to visualize it, perhaps, the absolute foundation.
So the key insight is this idea of a fundamental energy, not static, but intelligent, powerful, creative as a potential source of everything we experience.
That's the heart of it.
All right, so here's something to think about after we wrap up. If you consider this idea, just entertain it for a moment, an infinite, intelligent energy as the source of everything. What new possibilities might that open up for how you see your own life or the universe around you?
A powerful question to ponder.
Indeed. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. Welcome back to the deep dive. We got this really fascinating note from Manish Suryawanshi, and it's got me thinking about this, fundamental idea. Some kind of energy that exists beyond time, beyond space, even beyond how we perceive things.
Exactly. Yeah, Suryawanshi's note really dives into that, doesn't it? What it means for something to be, outside those usual limits.
Right.
So today, let's try to explore that idea a bit and maybe touch on how different traditions and maybe even physics sort of hint at something like this.
Okay, so Suryavanshi kicks things off with this core idea, right? That this energy isn't like stuck in time and space,
Yeah.
which are, the very basis of how we experience the physical world. He uses this really strong image, calls it the backdrop of reality itself, invisible yet ever present.
That image, the backdrop,
Hmm.
it really flips things, doesn't it?
Mm.
We usually think of time and space as the container for everything.
Yeah, the absolute limits.
But he's suggesting there's something uh, even more fundamental underneath all that. It's like asking, what holds the whole universe together? Or what's the canvas the universe is painted on?
Right, a foundation that isn't really part of the structure built on it.
Okay.
Then he brings in some metaphysical views. He mentions Advaita Vedanta, that concept of Brahman as nirguna.
Yes, Nirguna Brahman. It essentially means the ultimate reality, but like without any qualities or characteristics we can define, existing beyond all those dualities we use.
Beyond categories.
Exactly. And, if you look across different traditions, this isn't totally unique. Lots of mystical views talk about the divine as, well, eternal, omnipresent,
Mm.
basically not bound by our normal limits.
Mm.
So concepts like Nirguna Brahman, they challenge the very way we categorize things, suggesting a reality that just doesn't fit into our boxes.
It feels like everyone's trying to put words to something that's inherently wordless.
Precisely.
And then he throws in this this interesting link to physics, things like the multiverse or maybe higher dimensions.
Yeah, he does bring that up. But he's careful, right? He's not saying, physics proves this spiritual idea.
No, definitely not a direct one-to-one.
Right. It's more like an interesting parallel. Do these physics concepts, which also push beyond our normal 4 dimensions, give us a similar way to think about reality beyond what we directly see or measure?
Okay, that makes sense. Like physics exploring the edges of the known universe,
Uh-huh.
while Suryavanshi's exploring the edges of known reality itself, philosophically speaking.
You could put it that way. Yeah, it's about contemplating boundaries.
So if this energy is beyond all that, beyond time, space, perception, why can't we just, I don't know, find it, detect it somehow? Suryavanshi talks about our own limits, right? Human perception.
Yeah, and this is really key. Our senses, our brains,
Yeah.
they evolved to help us survive and navigate this physical world.
Right.
Sure.
Makes sense.
So if this energy operates completely outside those rules, then our usual tools, our senses, language, even our best scientific instruments,
Mhm.
they're just not equipped for it. They're going to fall short.
Mm.
Like Suryavanshi puts it, our understanding is always going to be partial, filtered through the lens of our limited perspective.
So we're kind of stuck with these filters. We can't just take them off.
Seems like it,
Mm.
at least not easily, or perhaps not completely.
But he does suggest we might experience it in other ways, indirectly. Things like intuition, meditation, even art or spirituality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If direct perception is off the table, maybe these more subtle human experiences, maybe they act like reflections or echoes, shadows perhaps, of that underlying energy.
Like a gut feeling or a sudden insight.
Could be. That feeling, when an idea seems to pop into your head from nowhere, maybe that's a little glimpse, something filtering through. Or moments in meditation where you feel connected to something larger.
Okay. So bringing it all together, Suryavanshi has this really simple summary. He says, this energy is bigger than time, space, or anything we can see or think about. It's everywhere and nowhere, like a dream we can't fully understand.
Yeah, that's a great way to boil it down. It captures that feeling of
Right.
something immense, fundamental, but also elusive,
Yeah.
beyond our full grasp.
Right. Everywhere and nowhere. It's quite a paradox.
It is. It points to a reality that just might operate on totally different principles than the ones we know.
So the big takeaway from digging into Suryavanshi's note is really this idea, this concept of an energy that transcends everything we normally use to understand reality. Time, space, perception, the works.
That's the core of it, yeah.
And it leaves you with this thought, doesn't it? It wasn't explicitly in the note, but it builds on it. Could our own subjective experiences, those moments of deep intuition or maybe feeling connected to something, could those be actual, albeit small, hints, glimpses into that timeless, spaceless reality?
Mm.
Like, what if our intuition isn't just, a brain quirk, but maybe a different way of perceiving, something beyond our usual 5 senses?
That's a really provocative question to sit with. It opens up the possibility that our inner experiences might be more connected to the fundamental nature of reality than we usually assume. Food for thought. definitely.
Definitely. Well, thanks for diving into this with me. Lots to think about there.
Yeah, fascinating stuff.
Until the next deep dive.
Okay, welcome back. We've got some really interesting material today, specifically focusing on Manish Suryawanshi's work. We're going to dive into one of his, let's say, core ideas.
That's right. We're honing in on this concept Suryawanshi puts forward about a kind of unifying energy, an energy that he suggests connects all possible universes.
Right, so our mission today is really to explore that, to try and unpack this idea of a fundamental energy linking everything. He actually says it envelops and unites the infinite universes. When you first encountered that phrase, envelops and unites, what did that suggest to you? Is it just like a big container, or is it something deeper?
Well, I think it's definitely deeper. The phrase implies a sort of dual role.
Yeah.
It's not just the space they exist in, but it's also the very stuff they're made of, the essential thread, perhaps, that runs through all realities.
Okay, that makes sense. It feels like it connects to some very old philosophical ideas, doesn't it?
Evi-
I mean, I was thinking about the Rig Veda, Aiken Sat, truth is one.
Precisely. Yeah, Ekam Sapat. That ancient insight that suggests there's a single ultimate reality behind all the diverse forms we see.
Uh-huh.
Suryawanshi's unifying energy, well, you could see it as a contemporary way of looking at that. Like all the different universes are just, expressions of this one underlying energy.
So it's kind of echoing that ancient thought. And it's not purely philosophical either, is it? I think you mentioned some theological parallels too.
Yes, absolutely. The idea of panentheism, for example, seems relevant here.
Panentheism, right?
Yeah, the belief that the divine or the ultimate reality isn't just separate from creation, but actually permeates through it while also transcending it. It mirrors this concept of an energy that's both within each universe and also sort of beyond them all.
Okay. Now this is where I found it really intriguing. The source material hints at possible links or maybe resonances with science. Quantum entanglement came up.
Ah, yes, entanglement. It's fascinating, isn't it? How particles can remain connected, instantly influencing each other over vast distances. Now, Suryawanshi isn't saying entanglement proves his interuniversal energy exists. It's more like, well, it's a powerful analogy from our own observable universe that hints at a deeper fundamental interconnectedness. Makes you wonder.
Right. It's like a clue, maybe.
Yeah.
A hint that things might be connected in ways we don't fully understand yet.
Yeah.
There's also that analogy you shared, the wave in the ocean. How does that help visualize this?
Oh, the wave and ocean one is quite useful, I think. Imagine each universe as a distinct wave on the surface, unique shake, unique duration, right?
Okay.
But every single wave is still fundamentally made of the same thing, the ocean. And that ocean represents the underlying unifying energy. They look separate, but they're part of the same substance.
So this energy isn't just a passive background. It's more like the fabric, the glue holding existence together, preventing these universes from being truly separate islands.
Exactly. It suggests that this perceived separation is maybe illusory at the deepest level, that everything is profoundly interconnected through this energy field, which leads to a pretty big question, doesn't it? If that's the case, what does it mean for us, for how we see ourselves?
Yeah, it completely shifts your perspective.
Yeah.
Suryawanshi seems to argue that if this is true, then everything, us, other beings, other dimensions, maybe you're all just different expressions of this one single infinite energy connected across all time and space.
Yeah.
Quite profound.
He uses another analogy, too, didn't he? Something about rooms in a house.
Ah, yes, the different rooms in one big house analogy. It's a nice, simple way to put it. Each universe is like a different room, with its own furniture, its own style.
Right.
But they all share the same foundation, the same structure. They're all part of the same building, the same underlying reality.
Okay. So, pulling it all together then, the core takeaway from the material you brought from Suryawanshi's work is this idea of a fundamental unity. All universes connected by and arising from one single, all-encompassing energy. That really captures the essence of it, yes.
So let's leave our listeners with this thought to ponder. If all universes truly do share the same fundamental essence, this single energy, what could that imply? What are the deeper implications for how we understand existence itself, maybe consciousness, or the very nature of reality? It's definitely something to think more about. Thanks for exploring that with us today.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So imagine just one single source for everything. I mean, everything. Sand, stars, even our own thoughts.
Right.
Today, we're really diving into that idea, this fundamental energy that seems to be behind it all.
And what's fascinating is how you see hints of this everywhere, spiritual texts, philosophy, even cutting-edge science.
Exactly. We've got sources touching on Hinduism, Shaktism, non-dualism, Christianity, Islam,
Yeah.
but also things like Iman Siwa and quantum fields.
It's quite a mix, but they all seem to be circling this core concept of unity.
So our mission really is to explore what this unified energy idea means. For us, for the universe. Maybe find some of those aha moments.
Yeah, let's jump in. It's a big topic.
Okay, first up, this energy isn't just like one static thing. It's incredibly versatile.
Totally. Think of it as a cosmic shapeshifter. That's a good analogy from the source
A
material.
shapeshifter, I like that. So it can become matter, light, forces.
Even things we think of as abstract, maybe, like love or consciousness itself. The potential seems limitless.
Which kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? These neat little boxes we put things in, solid, liquid, gas, energy, thought maybe they're not so separate after all.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You see that in concepts like Maya. In Hinduism, this idea that the diversity we see is, well, maybe an illusion layered over a single reality.
Or Shakti, the divine feminine energy.
Yes, exactly. Manifesting as all of creation. And then you have science with Einstein's Ipsi-Tourth literally telling us matter and energy are interchangeable.
Wow. So it's not just flexible, it's fundamentally unbounded. It's not limited by the physics we know because it's the source of them.
That's the implication, yeah.
Yeah.
Capable of creating infinite possibilities, infinite forms.
Okay, so if this one energy is the source of everything, what about deities? Gods and goddesses across different religions, how do they fit in?
Well, the sources suggest something pretty profound here.
Mm.
That when someone is praying to, say, Lord Rama or Jesus or focusing on Allah, they're actually connecting with that same underlying field of energy.
So different names, different stories.
But the same fundamental essence.
Yeah.
Like calling the same person by different nicknames. Or maybe think of them as personalized interfaces, ways for us to connect with something vast.
Personalized interfaces. Okay. So figures like Krishna, Shiva, Kali, Durga.
Lakshmi, Saraswati, Jesus, Allah. They become different expressions, different focal points for accessing that same universal energy.
That really changes how you might look at different faiths, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests less about separate truths and more about different paths, different lenses, all looking towards the same fundamental reality.
Which leads us straight into this idea of oneness. If everything comes from this single energy.
Then everything is that energy in some way. We are all quite literally interconnected.
That reminds me of the Upanishadic teaching Tat Taivamasi.
Thou art that.
Yes.
Your individual self, your soul, isn't separate from the ultimate universal reality. It is that reality.
And you find echoes of this everywhere, right? Not just Hinduism.
Oh, absolutely. Sufism in Islam, Christian mysticism, indigenous spiritual traditions across the globe, they often speak of this deep unity.
Even science seems to point that way, doesn't it? The Big Bang starting from a singularity, the interconnectedness of quantum fields.
It does suggest a common origin and a deep entanglement of everything that exists.
So thinking about this for someone listening, if we're all part of this single energy field.
It has huge implications, I think, for compassion, for empathy. If you harm another, you're in a sense harming a part of yourself.
It makes unity less of a nice idea and more like the fundamental structure of reality. Each of us is like a spark of the infinite.
Exactly. It provides this amazing unifying framework. It can bridge spirituality, philosophy, even science, all pointing towards this interconnected wonder.
Okay, so wrapping this up. The big takeaway seems to be this profound interconnectedness.
Yeah, everything from the tiniest particle to the grandest cosmic structure, even the deities we might revere, all expressions of one single versatile energy.
So here's something to maybe sit with.
That
How might really feeling this underlying unity change how you see the world day to day, your interactions, your place in it all?
could recognizing that shared source, that shared energy, actually foster, a deeper connection and understanding in your own life.
Something to reflect on. Thanks for exploring that with me.
My pleasure. It's fascinating stuff. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
So today we're tackling a really fascinating concept. This idea that maybe all the different gods, goddesses, deities we talk about, could they actually just be different ways of seeing the same fundamental energy?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
And we've got some source material that dives right into that perspective.
Exactly. So our mission really is to unpack that with you, explore this view.
And the source puts it quite directly, actually. It says, when you worship Rama, it takes on the form and characteristics of Lord Rama.
Right.
Hence, whatever deity you are worshiping, you are actually worshiping the same field of energy. Pretty clear statement.
Very clear. It sets the stage. So, okay, let's look at the examples the source uses to illustrate this. It starts with Hinduism.
Yeah, which is a great place to start given the, vast pantheon. Rama, Krishna, Shiva.
Kali, Durga, Lakshmi, Saraswati, the list goes on.
Exactly. And the perspective offered is that these aren't entirely separate beings, but different faces or aspects of the ultimate reality, Brahman.
Like different windows looking onto the same landscape.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And the source doesn't stop there. It draws parallels.
Right. It brings in Christianity, Jesus, the Son of God, embodying the divine logos.
And Islam, with Allah as the one singular, all-encompassing divine reality.
So the suggestion isn't that they're identical in doctrine, obviously, but that maybe the object of worship, that ultimate reality, shares a commonality underneath the names and stories.
Precisely. And this is where it gets quite interesting, I think. The source argues these differences, the forms, the stories, the characteristics, they're shaped by context.
Context like culture, belief.
Culture, belief, tradition, even the individual worshipers, devotion and intention. It's like the energy itself is responsive.
Responsive? How so?
Well, the idea is that the universal energy field kind of adapts or takes the form that the worshiper approaches it with. If you approach seeking Rama, the energy manifests with Rama's qualities.
Okay, so it's less about the energy having one fixed shape and more about it meeting the worshiper where they are.
Yeah, that seems to be the core idea. Think of it like water taking the shape of the glass you pour it into. The water's still water.
Right, and if you follow that logic, well, it starts to make the boundaries between different religions look a bit porous.
Porous, yeah, or maybe less absolute. It points towards perhaps a shared underlying truth that different traditions are expressing through their unique cultural lenses.
The source had a neat analogy for this.
Yeah.
Something about interfaces.
Ah, yes, the personalized interfaces. That the forms, the stories of deities act like interfaces, making something infinite and maybe incomprehensible.
More accessible, more relatable on a human level.
Exactly, like apps on a phone, you mentioned that earlier. Different apps, different functions, maybe different looks.
So they all connect to the same underlying internet, the same network.
Right. So someone needing comfort might connect through one interface, someone seeking strength through another, but they're tapping into the same fundamental source or energy.
So what does this imply for, someone listening? For their own practice or how they view other faiths?
Well, the implication seems to be that devotion, in whatever form it takes to whichever deity resonates, is ultimately a valid way to connect with that universal energy. It shifts the focus from which one is right to the active connection itself.
Finding an authentic path to that source.
The source even simplifies it further, saying praying to Rama, or Jesus, or Allah, or Kali. It's like calling the same person by different names.
You're still reaching the same person, the same energy, just using a different name that resonates for you or your tradition.
That's the essence of the perspective presented.
Okay, so wrapping up this part of our dive, the core idea from our source is this potential unity underlying the incredible diversity of worship we see across the globe.
Yeah, that these distinct deities might just be different expressions, different facets of one single fundamental divine energy.
Which leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? Maybe consider this. If we entertain this idea of a single underlying energy expressing itself in multiple ways, how might that shift how you personally view different spiritual paths? Or even your own beliefs about the divine?
It's a perspective that invites you to look beyond the surface differences, perhaps. See potential connections where maybe we usually see divisions, something to mull over.
Absolutely. Food for thought.
Okay, so you sent over some really interesting material, all centered on this core idea.
Right.
The idea that basically everything, people, the universe, maybe even deities, it all stems from one single infinite energy source.
Exactly. A fundamental unity behind everything.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack that, Look at the concept of oneness from the angles your sources bring up, spiritual, philosophical, even a bit scientific.
And the central thought is quite profound, that all these beings, all universes we can imagine, they aren't really separate entities.
They're more like Expressions.
Expressions precisely of that same infinite energy. It sort of dissolves the boundaries we usually perceive.
Okay, so when thinking about unity, my mind immediately jumped to something in the Upanishads you highlighted, Tat Tvam Asi. How does that specifically fit into this picture?
Ah, yes. Tat Samasi, or thou art that.
Hmm.
It's a cornerstone. It basically means your individual self, your soul, the Atman, isn't separate from the ultimate reality, Brahman.
So not just like it, but actually is it?
That's the teaching. It's an identity. The individual spark is the universal fire.
And your sources pointed out this isn't just a Hindu concept, is it?
Not at all. That's what's so compelling. You see echoes of this intuition of oneness everywhere.
Like where else?
Well, Sufism talks a lot about the unity of being, Wadat al-Wujud. Christian mystics describe achieving union with the divine. And many indigenous spiritual traditions view all of creation as inherently interconnected, sacred.
Different words, same core feeling.
Pretty much. Different paths pointing towards a similar understanding of a single source behind it all.
Okay, so we have these mystical or spiritual perspectives, but you mentioned science too. How does that connect with this idea of one source?
Well, think about cosmology. The Big Bang Theory, our best model for the universe's origin, suggests everything exploded outwards from an incredibly hot, dense single point, all matter, all energy originating together.
Right, from a singularity.
Exactly. And then in fundamental physics, there's this ongoing search for a unified theory, sometimes called a theory of everything.
Like trying to link gravity and quantum mechanics.
Yes, aiming to describe all the basic forces and particles as different facets of one single underlying field or reality. It's not proven, but it resonates with that idea of a fundamental source.
That's fascinating. So if we take this idea seriously, this fundamental unity, what does that actually imply for, how we live or see the world?
Ah, the implications are quite significant, I think. If, at the deepest level, the divisions between us are illusory,
Then things like compassion change, right?
they become almost logical, yeah. It's not just being nice, it's recognizing the shared essence in the other person. Empathy becomes a natural response to seeing that interconnectedness.
The whole concept of us versus them starts to break down a bit.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it also suggests that every single thing, every person, carries within them a spark of that infinite source, that creative potential.
Okay, so pulling back for the big picture, what does this unity suggest across those different fields you mentioned? Spirituality, philosophy, science?
Well, spiritually, it could imply that maybe all these different religions, they're like different paths climbing the same mountain, heading towards the same ultimate truth. It fosters tolerance.
Okay.
Philosophically, it points towards a fundamental oneness of reality, with all the diversity we see being like waves in the surface of a single ocean.
And scientifically?
It keeps alive that possibility, that hope for discovering a single underlying field or energy that explains, well, everything in the cosmos or even multiverse.
So the really short version, it all comes from the same energy stuff and we're all connected.
That's the essence of it, yes. And thinking about this, reflecting on it, can be quite humbling.
Humbling. How so?
It makes you realize how limited our everyday perception might be compared to the infinite.
Right.
It fosters unity, seen as shared essence, and honestly, it inspires a sense of awe
At the universe.
at its creativity, its sheer dynamism, and how it's all, woven together. It cultivates a kind of universal kinship, seeing everything as an expression of the same energy.
This deep dive really hammers home that interconnectedness, that single origin point. It's a powerful concept.
It truly is. And maybe a final thought to leave listeners with is this. Just consider, how might really internalizing this underlying unity begin to shift how you view your everyday interactions and maybe even your own place in this vast interconnected cosmos?